Hi, welcome to another episode of A Fresh Look at Mental Health, but a fresh look at life. And I'm really excited to have Lucy, Claire and Frank with me again for a chat. And this could go anywhere, but it's really lovely to be with you guys again. So in our little talk beforehand, we had a bit of a talk around how come things are easy in one area of our lives and maybe sometimes not so easy in another. And we thought we'd maybe explore that a bit. So I don't know if anyone wants to. Claire, if you want to start.
I think for me, it's one area of this understanding that is just, it's endlessly interesting, you know, how I think everybody has areas in their life that they don't really sort of do anything about it. Just life just happens in that area. And then all of us have other areas, it's different for different people, that we sort of feel like we have to do things about. Like, and I was just saying a minute ago that for me, that's very much around jobs and money. I have a lot of thinking about it and feeling like I have to do something to make things happen. And I go in and out of it, and the sort of the moments of just sort of relaxing and letting it flow are always so much better and feel so much better. And yet I sort of so far always come back into feeling like I have to do something at another point. So yeah, that was kind of,
yeah. And like my thing is food, and we were just talking before about how so for me food is a big I love what our friend Anna says. She says, you know, I've got a difficult relationship with food. So I, you know, and I can trace it back to lots of different things in my past. But what it comes down to now is that for me, I've got a lot of thinking around food and how much I'm eating, what I look like, how, you know, all the sort of related stuff, what's good for you, what's bad for me, what that sort of thing is about. Whereas some people don't think about it at all. It's just energy, it's just fuel. And what's like, it's fascinating to kind of see how that plays out, because to me it looks like, okay, well, the thought of food is potentially a neutral subject. You know, food is neutral, it's not good or bad. But the thinking I put on top of it makes it, like in my eyes, a bad thing, you know, like a big deal, a really big deal. So I get really attached to my thinking around food. Whereas somebody else might take that neutral thought of food and not attach a lot to it, and it's just in, out, and happy days, let's move on with our lives sort of thing. And I think that's what you're saying about jobs and money as well, Claire. Like, and money's one for me as well, you know, sometimes, you know, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, okay, well, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to fix this perceived problem I have around food or around money? And actually, in that space, it's really hard to come up with a plan that sticks, because I can come up with an idea to exercise and diet, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. You know, I don't do it. So what's that about? What's that about? How come I know what I should do, but I don't do it?
I think that one of the things that we tend to do in an area where we feel lacking in confidence, an area where we struggle, is that we tend to go outside. We'll tend to look at books, watch videos, go on YouTube, seek experts to basically inform us about what it is that we should do in order to tackle that area where we feel lacking. And there isn't necessarily anything wrong with seeking outside input. I think the difficulty is that in those areas we tend to hand over almost ownership of the problem to things outside us. You know, the expertise that we've got in a book. And inevitably, the experts don't all agree. And certainly, it's never customized to our particular set of circumstances, our starting point, our history. And so none of that outside expertise is really, in its kind of presented form, that helpful, which is why I think we tend to kind of listen to something and think, oh, that sounds good. That worked for, you know, the person that wrote the book and all the fans he's got, but I'll do it. And it seems to work for a while, but because it doesn't really fit that well to our particular needs, it kind of, in the end, we kind of fall out with it. And then we go off in search of something else. All of those things are about looking outside for the answer. Whereas in the areas where we feel comfortable, where we don't really give things a lot of thought, it's not like we never think about anything or that we never seek new information. It's just that when we get that information, we can easily kind of just decide what aligns with our way of thinking about things and what doesn't, what fits and what doesn't. But in the area where we feel insecure, we're actually not kind of tuned in to our own knowing. So part of kind of getting more comfortable in those areas is just about recognizing that what you're doing is always going outside for the support instead of tuning into your own inner knowing and then choosing from what's outside and your own ideas about what it is that makes sense for you to do.
And that kind of ties in with what I was talking about earlier. To, you know, sort of go back to what you were saying, Bron, about food, is I was noticing my behavior or my thinking around food recently because it was a topic of conversation. And what I noticed is that I don't really have any thinking about it. And even at the beginning of lockdown, when I wasn't able to exercise or be as active as I like to be, and I noticed that I was putting on weight, I just noticed it. I was like, I'm putting on a bit of weight. There's no thought around that. And what happened naturally was I figured out that if I get up early and I go to the park in the morning for a long, really long walk, which is what I wanted to do anyway, it was nothing to do with losing weight, then the weight comes off. I was in, as Frank said, I was sort of in tune with what I wanted and what I needed, and as a natural byproduct of that, I balanced out my weight gain, which actually wasn't an issue for me. But I think what I'm trying to say is, because I don't have a concern in that area, because that's not an area I feel I need to control, because I don't have insecure thoughts around it, the thoughts come and go. I don't hang on to anything. But then I have other areas where I do have a lot of insecure thinking. And I suddenly notice that I have an insecure thought, then there'll be an attempt to control something around that. Let me be a bit more specific. Parenting, perfect one. I have a lot of insecure thinking about my parenting. And so when things in my mind go a little bit wrong, and I'll give you an example. At the moment, my child is spending too much time on a screen because I'm writing an essay. Oh, wow, the conversations that are going on in my head around that, like I'm a terrible mother, he's going to be damaged forever, it's going to be my fault, I've got to pull him off the screen. We end up having fight. I end up every morning, I'm like, right, this is the structure of the day. And then he doesn't stick to the structure and I don't stick to the structure. And then I'm a terrible mother and we have fights. I mean, the awfulness that has gone on in our household because I've tried to control the outside in a bid to make my inside and my insecure feelings feel better. And what have I done other than create a whole hullabaloo in my household, which makes me feel even worse? And this is, I struggle with that on a daily basis. So I have a huge amount of thinking about whether I'm a good mum, whether I'm doing it right, what will be the outcome, what will be the future. I mean, those voices live in my head and those thoughts are very, I'm very attached to those thoughts. And I cause chaos. In contrast to my food, where I'm not attached to any of the thoughts, and everything just balances itself out because I trust it'll be okay. And it is okay. But yeah, my insecure thoughts tell me to change the outside. They tell me that the outside must be different and then I can feel better on the inside. And with my food, it doesn't. With my food, I'm just happy to let it be. And strangely, I have no problems around food and lots of problems around parenting.
I think that's such a great example, especially because a lot of parents I'm speaking to, and myself included, feel the same way at the moment, And I had a chat with someone yesterday about this sort of topic, and she was saying how in her household they've stopped forcing their kids to say sorry in a way, and it's all about reconnection. And I just loved what she said, because what struck me as you were saying is that what's happened is that we've disconnected from ourselves and from our children in that instance, isn't it? So like us thinking as a parent that too much screen time, which is a big one, is going to damage our children, it's kind of taken away from our knowing that they are okay and that they know, if they listen to their inner wisdom, they know what to do. And I've tried experimenting with it, and every now and then I say, okay, fine, girls, watch TV the whole morning or whatever. And inevitably after a few hours, they stop it themselves and they go and play and they do something that I'd prefer them to do without me necessarily having to get involved. However, when I get involved and I'm like, okay, girls, you got to switch it off now. No. And it becomes a massive big fight. Or the sweet thing, like sweets is another one. I feel like I'm constantly saying no to sweets and junk food. And my fear is that if I say, yeah, okay, go ahead, go wild, they'll just eat the whole load. They don't always, especially the little one. She's still able to recognize it in herself when she's had enough and she'll stop. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is that maybe just in those instances, we got caught up in our insecure thinking around the topic and forgotten that actually there's a well-being there underneath. And like you said, with a natural ebb and flow, and maybe if we didn't try and control the outside, exactly like you said, if I didn't try and control the outside with my dieting, okay, well, I've got to eat this way, because what happens as soon as I plan out my diet is that I'm like, no, screw that, no, I can't cope with that, I need it, and there doesn't seem to be a space even. There doesn't seem to be a space between the thought and the behavior that I have. However, if I'm aware of my feeling and my state of mind and noticing that I'm getting wound up or feeling anxious or not great, then maybe that's where the space is. Maybe in the noticing of that's where the space is to kind of, okay, hang on, what's going on here?
Yeah. Or maybe just to just as you were talking, it was interesting because I suddenly thought, hang on, I've never asked him how much screen time he thinks he should have. You know, he's 9. He can make that decision, and then we could have a conversation about it. But I'm always imposing this thing. And I was also thinking about, and just then when I said that I've never asked him, I would imagine mothers going, you don't ask your kids how much screen time they need. But it'd be an interesting conversation, wouldn't it? And the other thing I was thinking, I think I might have lost it. Oh yeah, it was around food, actually. It was around, I noticed one of the things I was paying attention to after that conversation that made me pay attention to my food. I noticed what happens when I know I've had enough. So like I might be serving some food, and even if it's something really delicious and I think, oh, I'll have another, there's something in me that goes, no, that's enough. And I'm able to hear that because there's no other thoughts of, you know, there's no other busyness going on. I'm able to hear, whether we want to call it mind or whatever it is, just goes, no, that's enough. It's really delicious, but that's enough. Not in a sort of restrictive way, but in a that's all you need way. And it's very clear to me when that voice talks to me. It says, no, you don't need more than that. And I'm like, okay, and I stop. But I would imagine that if there's a lot of busyness going on, that you don't hear that. That there's a sort of, I should, and I mustn't. Oh, I'm going to, I need a treat. Blah, blah, blah. There's all that confusion going on. I don't know. But it was just interesting to me that I was able to notice my own wisdom. Around food, I can hear my wisdom because there's nothing else going on. Whereas with other things, I can't hear my wisdom. Does that make sense?
And also, Lucy, I remember you saying a few conversations ago about sometimes you can hear it, but you don't listen to it. Like I do that with jobs. Like I will, like last night even, I was like looking on some job websites, and the feeling was horrible, and I was sat there thinking like, this isn't helpful, and yet I still did it. It's really funny how you know the wisdom is always there. We just don't always pay attention.
Yeah. Or we can be so attached to other stuff that we choose not to.
Yeah, or it's not coming in a form that we like, or something that we want, that we think we want, so therefore we don't listen to it maybe.
Yeah, that's a big one. You want a different outcome. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I was thinking that, like, I can hear it sometimes. Well, I can hear it, but I ignore it. That's sort of like, okay, enough. You know, you really don't need this.
But the interesting thing about the wisdom is it's not judgmental. It's not saying you don't need this. It's just like, that's enough. It's very neutral. It's very neutral. It's not. And that's what I became aware of in that moment. I was aware of the neutrality of wisdom. Of it wasn't telling me off or encouraging me, or it didn't have any sort of tone to it. It was just like, okay, that's enough. That's all you need. I don't know. I don't know if you can. If that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because actually so in effect, what I'm hearing is just more thinking, because it's not coming with a nice feeling at all. Yeah. It's coming with a very like, oh my God, look at you again, you disgusting creature. Yeah, that's not wisdom.
The judgment, exactly. Yeah. It comes without judgment. The wisdom, doesn't it?
Oh, you bad parent. You know, look at what you're doing to your kids now.
Yeah. And
coming back to that feeling piece again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lisa, interrupted.
No, Frank, go.
I think it's important to distinguish between the feeling that comes with being in touch with your wisdom, with having perspective, with having a clear mind, and the feeling that comes from your you're thinking about something. So that, I'm saying in another way what you just said, but that thinking about whether you should have that dessert or, the second sausage that's left over, that could be a feeling that is coming from your mind, your perspective, your impersonal mind, your wisdom. And it could be just the feeling that comes with your thought, the critical thought maybe, that you are not the person that you ought to be and you're not behaving in the way that you should. And the difference is the feeling, the feeling that comes with that easy flow, that lightness, the neutrality. That is the the wisdom. That's the guidance. That's the bit to pay attention to. But the critical, sharp, heavy, that's just your personal thinking that you've kind of owned for a while and haven't yet come off yet. And learning to recognize which of those two things, it's all in the feeling. Basically, if you're feeling good, you're in the flow, you're getting a nice connection with the best way to go. But if you're feeling heavy, if you're feeling slow, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling any of those sort of unpleasant things, they're basically telling that the quality of your thinking is down in the basement, and it's not something you should be paying attention to. You should just be recognizing that that's where you are.
That was very clearly put, Frank. Yeah. It's there's a sort of agitation that that doesn't feel good. And you're right. That's exactly how I noticed that voice. I was like, oh, this voice is neutral, and there's no decision to be made. There's no like, oh, should I, shouldn't I, there's no pull. It was just like, oh, enough. No. And it has a lightness and to it. Yeah.
Lots of food for thought.
Yeah. I love the way we've gone from food and bad parenting to the feeling.
Yeah.
Which is where, which is what matters really.
And it really, really can be translated to sort of every aspect of your life where you feel like there's a problem, in inverted commas. There's something to be done, even if it's your general state of mind. If you think that depression or anxiety is a problem that needs to be fixed, it's going to be the same sort of caught up feeling. Like I was just I just saw that while you were talking. It was like, if I'm in a depressed state, and that is where a lot of my eating comes from, actually, is that state of mind that I'm in the first place. But then noticing that actually all that's happening is I'm just still getting caught up in thought, even when I think I'm trying to fix it, it's still like just a mishmash of the same, coming from the same place. Yeah.
Whenever you feel like you need to fix it, that's an indication that you're not in that clear state of mind.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a clear state of mind, it's not about whether there's anything to do, because you do things all the time that come easily, that you don't think about. It's just the next thing to do in whatever context. I'm sure that, that's what Lucy was talking about in the context of food. She doesn't have loads of thinking about food. So food just doesn't bubble up into her consciousness very often, because it all just gets taken care of. But the areas where we struggle, where we have a lot of heavy thinking, where it looks like a problem, that's where it keeps kind of coming up into our consciousness that we've got to make decisions, we've got to act, we've got to fix. And you keep looking in that direction and it just intensifies it. But it seems so counterintuitive to actually look the other way and say, all that's going on is that I'm in a lousy state of mind about this subject. We take those feelings of urgency, requirement to act, to take action, as something other than simply a symptom of our cloudy state of mind.
And I love that as well, because again, there's nothing to do about it other than notice it. And that's because I get caught up in that. I get caught up in like, oh, I'm in some bad thinking, I've got to change that. And I don't. I just have to notice it. That's all.
Yeah. I think yeah. I find that for me, like noticing it and then noticing how much I'm listening to it. Like, oh my God, yeah, okay, it's there, but I'm still choosing to listen to it. I'm still seeing everything through the lens of that. Which I don't, it's lovely how talking about this just opens it all up again and just makes you see things clearer. That's been great.
Yeah.
That noticing is a key kind of, I was going to say a stage, but it makes it sound like there's something to do, but it is kind of on the path to having some fresh thought, because you're changing the relationship with the thoughts you've already got. You're somehow stepping back from them and just noticing what's going on. And instead of being lost in them, instead of just feeling the effect, it's like you pop out and you're looking and you're thinking, oh, that's ridiculous.
And you create a gap, don't you?
That gap.
You create a gap, and in that gap is the possibility of fresh thought. Yeah.
And you see it when you see it as well. For me, that's another key point, because like quite often you can kind of get into a whole nother layer of thinking of like, oh, I really want to see something in this direction, but actually that's just more thinking, and that's just like, that's not helpful either. But sometimes that's where you go, and then the moments of when you get that kind of gap happen in their own time, whenever it happens, kind of thing. Like, you can't force it, can you? You can look in the direction that's helpful, but you can't force it.
No, you can't force it. But if you're looking in the wrong direction, you'll never see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, that's been beautiful. I think we're almost time. Any final words from anyone? I think that's been a really, really powerful conversation for me. Thank you. I hope if for people listening, this has been interesting as well. And if anybody wants to join in and talk to us about it, then we're doing a it'll come and chat on a Tuesday at 8:00 on Zoom, or you can always send us an email or on Facebook. Get in touch at a Fresh Look at Mental Health. Anybody want to finish up?
No, I just want to say thank you, Bron. Thanks for creating a space.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for being here, guys, and I shall see you all soon. Bye.